All right, thanks for staying with us, everyone. Parliament is set to approve a total appropriation of 291 billion Ghana cedis this Friday to support government spending for the 2025 fiscal year. This approval will grant Finance Minister Dr. Karsila to force the legal authority to access and utilize funds starting the 1st of April. Now, without Parliament's approval, the minister would be unable to proceed with any expenditure of revenue for the year. Now, earlier this year, Parliament had already approved budget estimates to cover the first 3 months of government's operations. Meanwhile, the Finance Minister has pledged to address the economic challenges facing the country, emphasizing that achieving key macroeconomic targets will be his priority. He made the commitment as he concluded his remarks on the 2025 budget in Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, this budget is one that is people-centered, with innovative solutions to address our deep-seated socio-economic issues. Mr. Speaker, it addresses our economic challenges, provide the necessary environment for business growth, introduce a 24-hour economy initiative, provide economic opportunities, create the atmosphere in providing ample jobs for our citizens. Mr. Speaker, it is also a budget that provides for the vulnerable and the poor. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget that provides hope for all Ghanaians. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a budget that ensures that whatever we need as a country to bring back our past glory and even beyond is provided. Mr. Speaker, we have a job to do. We have started fixing the problems. We will fix all the major issues and improve living standards of our citizens. We will require the support of this House to execute effectively and efficiently. Mr. Speaker, we will take on board the constructive criticisms that we have received on the floor of this House to reset the economy of Ghana and to deliver the Ghana we all want. This year, Mr. Speaker, we have set ourselves key targets, and we believe this target will be achieved.
Well, Parliament has approved the budget estimates for several ministries, departments and agencies, including 1.2 billion Ghana cedis for the Ministry of Energy and Green Transition. However, Joy Business has learned that most ministries have had their budgets reduced from the amounts initially proposed. Majority Leader Mama Yaga, however, has assured that government will secure the necessary resources to implement all the policy projects outlined in the 2025 budget.
And I just listened to my colleague, the Honorable Minority Leader, who had just spoken. After listening to him, Mr. Speaker, I miss the days of people like J.H. Mensah, who, when they debated the budget, you walked away highly educated in economic figures, statistics, and policies. I was wondering whether we were listening to a debate of the budget or a debate about governance in this country. Mr. Speaker, in order that listeners are not confused, I want to restate that the debate is of the budget policy that was presented to this House and not governance generally. Mr. Speaker, the budget clearly establishes President John Dramani Mahama as a talk and do president of Ghana. Talk and do president of Ghana. Mr. Speaker, President John Dramani Mahama promised to abolish e-levy. E-levy, Yamutu. E-levy abolished. Talk and do president. President John Dramani Mahama promised to abolish the betting tax. Betting tax, Yamutu. Talk and do president. President John Dramani Mahama promised to abolish emission levies. Mr. Speaker, the budget policy promises to do that. Talk and do president.
Well, a bit more on this. I'm joined on Zoom by Head of Finance at UMB Capital, Nelson Kujo-Kwagbaji. Good afternoon to you. So, with the approval of the estimates for key ministries, what do you think the slashing of certain budget means for the execution of government projects?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dara, for having me. I think that the tone of government right from the beginning has to do with fiscal consolidation and expenditure rationalization. I believe that the cuts in government expenditure is going to bring in some level of efficiency. It is also going to reduce the kind of wastage that we have witnessed in the system over the years. However, cuts in expenditure to certain essential sectors of the economy may affect the development and growth of those sectors. For instance, if you look at energy and green transition, you realize that the debt level alone in that sector is huge. And so with a reduction in their budgetary allocation, is going to significantly affect that particular sector. But I think that the overall objective of government decision to cut the expenditure has to do with fiscal consolidation and expenditure rationalization.
Yeah, I mean, we had the finance minister very confident about government meeting its key fiscal targets, despite the cut to spending, especially within some ministries. How feasible is this?
Well, I think that as at the end of last year, the total growth was 5.7%. The finance minister has revised that to a prudent level of 4%. Again, inflation as at the end of last year was 23.8%. The finance minister made it clear that he intends to achieve 11.9% inflation target. Clearly, the performance of these macroeconomic indicators will largely be dependent on the performance of the economy. And so once the economy is doing pretty well, we expect that will translate into the realization or the achievement of the macroeconomic indicators. Don't forget, these macroeconomic indicators don't work in isolation. They are dependent on each other. And so once government policies are well implemented, well tailored, and well destinated to achieve specific objectives, we expect that the macroeconomic indicators will be achieved. Even though they are highly ambitious, I still believe that they are attainable and achievable.
I mean, what challenges do you anticipate he would face amid the spending cuts?
Please come again.
Now, I was asking what challenges you figure that the finance minister...
I think one of the major challenges that I foresee has to do with domestic revenue mobilization. In fact, if government is not able to raise the much needed domestic revenue, and that is going to throw the whole budget offboard. The Commissioner General for Ghana Revenue Authority made mention that he intends to raise 220 billion Ghana cedis this year. The question is, how is he going to raise that figure for the government? So domestic revenue mobilization is one of the challenges that I foresee. Another area of challenge I foresee has to do with expenditure management. In fact, government right from the beginning made it clear that they want to be very prudent with expenditure. And as I rightly mentioned, that has culminated into expenditure reduction and expenditure cut for most of the sectors and ministries. And so ministries must try as much as possible to spend within their budget, not to spend to the budget. I am expecting one day that a ministry will come out and tell us that, oh, we've been allocated 20 billion Ghana cedis, but we've been able to spend only 18 Ghana cedis. I think spending within the budget will significantly help the government in achieving its fiscal consolidation. And so expenditure management is one of the challenges that I expect the government to face. Another area has to do with investor confidence. You will realize that just last week, the government missed out on its auction target on the treasury bill market. Investors are gradually shying away, and so if care is not taken, the government may not be able to raise the needed domestic debt to finance its maturing obligation. And so these are some of the challenges I expect the finance minister or the economy to face in their quest to implement the 2025 fiscal documents.
We also watched the majority leader say that the government was going to raise some 220 billion cedis required for projects outlined in the 2025 budget. And so with these budget cuts, you wonder where are they going to get the resources from to fund some of these projects?
Exactly so. I mean, you have just nailed it. I think that one of the issues or areas that the government has to work on, or the GRA has to work on, has to do with the informal sector. In fact, I granted an interview some time ago, and I made it clear that Ghana, our economy is largely informal. The formal sector represents about 25 to 30% of, the working population. And so 25 people cannot be working to feed the rest of the 75 people. And so I think that the informal sector should play a critical role. And so the Commissioner General and the GRA team should focus more on the informal sector and rake them into the tax net. I also think that another area that we need to focus on has to do with tax compliance. You realize that most companies are not really compliant with tax regulations. And so they should actually make sure that the companies that are supposed to pay tax actually pay the needed tax. Then finally, I think we have to relook at our tax exemption regime as a country in order not to give free money to companies who don't actually deserve it. So I think with some of these measures, they should be able to hit their revenue mobilization drive for 2025 fiscal year.
The Finance Minister concluded his remarks on the 2025 budget debate by promising the government's commitment to fixing the economic challenges. I want us to talk about global uncertainties, because there's so many things happening globally that could affect our economy. Yesterday we talked about the tariff war. What policies should the government adopt to maintain stability?
Well, I think that is very important. I think our policies should be homegrown. Once your policies are homegrown, any external shocks that wants to hit you, the impact wouldn't be that much. For instance, the government intends to spend 1.5 billion on agri for economic transformation. That particular policy should be intended, it should be specific, and it should be designated to satisfy a particular sector. Don't forget, inflation is 23.1%, driven largely by food inflation. Planting for Food and Job 1.0, 2.0 has failed. And so I think that our policies should be homegrown, they should be well intended, they should be directed. Let me give you a few statistics. You will realize that in every household in Ghana, consumption of poultry and poultry-related products and even rice is on daily basis. And so once we are going to spend about 1.5 billion cedis on this particular project, I think the chunk of the money should be designated to the local poultry industry and also towards the local rice industry. In that case, you will realize that the policy impact will be felt directly by Ghanaians as a result of the homegrown nature of that policy. I also think that the gold board that the government intends to establish is also going to help stabilize the economy, because their mode of operation will be just like the Ghana Cocoa Board. And so much of the revenue from the gold will also be retained in the country in order to help absorb some of these shocks that we may experience as a result of the trade war between the US, Canada, China, and Mexico.
All right. Thank you so much for your thoughts this afternoon, Nelson Kudjo-Kwagbeji. He is head of finance at UME Capital. I appreciate your insights. Well, that brings us to a very important program in our Let that is happening tomorrow at 6 p.m. That's our thought leadership program focused on the 2025 budget. The theme is Fixing the Fundamentals. Is the 2025 budget Ghana's last shot at fiscal redemption? Well, be sure to join that discussion tomorrow, Thursday at 6 p.m. right here on the Joy News channel. We're headed for a short break. When we come back, we're going to be talking the aftermath of the rains and its impact on property. Don't go anywhere. And thanks for staying with us, everyone. ANC shopping mall here in Accra could face liability after cars were damaged following Tuesday's torrential rains. There's more in this report.
Under the country's insurance laws, if a car is parked on the commercial premises and is damaged, then the liability is on the part of that commercial property owner. That is, if that car was not insured, then the owner can fall on the commercial property insurance or call it the public liability. However, if these cars that have been damaged at the ANC shopping mall already have insurance, then their provider may handle their concerns unless the related risk, like rain, is excluded. We should also not forget that under the general insurance rules, no car owner can claim indemnity under both, that is the commercial insurance and his own insurance. Management of ANC Shopping Mall in a statement apologized for the challenge, whilst assuring the public that they are working with relevant authorities to address all concerns identified. They also announced that there hasn't been any human casualty after their solar panel collapsed yesterday during a downpour.
Time to talk tech, and the National Information Technology Agency, NITA, is facing a severe financial crisis with only 25 cedis in its Bank of Ghana account. You heard right. Despite a staggering debt of 813 million Ghana cedis, Minister of Communications Samuel Nati George, at a press briefing, accused the previous Akufo-Addo administration of signing a third-party contract that diverted all of NITA's revenue to a private company, leaving the agency financially crippled and burdened with massive debt. Lead for Eyes of Africa, Henry Kobler, joins me on Zoom to discuss this. Henry, well, given NITA's critical role in providing IT infrastructure, how does this financial crisis impact the delivery of public services that rely on the agency's resources?
Thank you very much, Daryl. So, Daryl, last week we spoke about the president's Twitter account being hacked. And one of the things that I had mentioned clearly was that how are the protocols and, let's say, email systems of government institutions being in place looked at. One of the critical points is need for NITA relative that will provide some of these services to government institutions, email services, data services, interagency, digital communications between these government institutions, and e-governance services as well. I mean, NITA sits right in the middle of this. And so, I mean, if you're looking at them handing most of these critical institutional infrastructures to private companies and now being in debt where they really wouldn't be looking into having a lot of revenue flows, that's really a big deal. And it's really a shame to be coming to the table to be talking about debt, whilst we will be really looking at conversations related to growth and KPIs in the digital sector for government institutions and for the citizenry as well. I mean, if you're looking at what NITA really sets, what it could even impact is the Ghana.gov system, which for me, I've used it before and it really sort of works in what it's intended to do. And so if you're looking at such a platform being affected really because of debt, it's really a shame to be having conversations related to that. There's going to be a lot of stalling between on digital transformations for the agenda that is driven, and even for private service delivery in itself. And again, you're looking at essential public institutions reverting to manual processes if you're going to have, say, downtimes on some of the hosting platforms that they are going to be on. So again, really for me, it's not a good thing, and there's going to be a lot of impact if this debt really cuts across to having most of these services shut down.
Yeah, I'm sure many watching are wondering what is NITA, or what was their mandate? Are they even living up to expectation? I want to find out what you think should be the immediate reforms to ensure that NITA is financially stable and to prevent any such occurrence in future.
I think that the minister relatively had mentioned that he was going to go to Parliament. I'm looking forward to hearing what he would say. But immediately, I think that there has to be a proper audit and some level of transparency into the financial inflows for NITA. Again, there has to be that point where they enforce centralization of billing systems. For me, again, it would really be about instituting proper insight into the role and then strengthening the MOC and then the Public Procurement Authority in terms of what NITA relatively lets go and again brings in terms of data storages and infrastructures. Again, I think that it has to be serious, legal implications for some of the diversions that we're seeing. Again, I'm happy that he says that he's really not going to sign off the debt unless, of course, he basically calls them into conversations, which is probably the private companies that are involved. And I think that has to be a good reform we can be looking at. But again, a proper audit and transparency to what is really happening on NITA's front should really be brought to book.
You think it's a good idea involving the private sector to manage the resources of NITA?
Well, private sectors really bring some level of innovation. They bring expertise, operational efficiencies to it. But if you really look at what NITA really does, you realize that it sits in the house of data, digital data, and that's a very crucial part. People say that data is a new gold. And so if it's the new gold, that means the government really should be looking in that direction. And public-private partnerships could really come in. But again, it should be sort of balanced. It shouldn't be politically biased towards people who are politically influenced and could get a contract because they have private companies and it could sort of benefit them. Government really can have some level of expertise coming to the front and pursuing and running some of these infrastructures. But again, public brings in that expertise. But I think that private companies can relatively have some level of limits and balance to what they basically hand over to them.
All right, Henry Kobler, thank you, lead for Eyes of Africa. Appreciate your insights as always here on the marketplace. Well, before we go, I want to tell you one more time about Thought Leadership Program, which is taking place on Thursday on the 2025 budget. We'll show you that in a bit. There you go. Fixing the Fundamentals is the 2025 budget, Ghana's last shot at fiscal redemption. It's going to be hosted by Super Morning Show host, Head of Joy Business, Winston Amwa, I'm sorry. That's 6 p.m. That's on the Joy News channel right here. Do not miss it. And so that's programming alert for you. It will also be live on all our socials. That is on Thursday, 6 p.m. right here on the Joy News channel. More news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. No one can export gold except Gold Board. Sami Jenfrey. Also, GRA undertakes income tax assessments on business mogul Richard Amakwe's investments. myjoyonline.com/business. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your afternoon.